What is up, Theology Nerds? This is Tripp, and guess what? Brian McLaren is joining me for this episode of the Theology Nerd Podcast. He's also going to be hanging out with me at the Wild Goose Festival in Hot Springs, North Carolina, July 12th through 15th. So get on it. Come camp. Just come camp with thousands of progressive Christians for some spirit, some justice, some music, some art. And don't forget, Theology Beer Camp, August 16th to 18th in Asheville, North Carolina, craft beer capital of the Southeast. TheologyBeerCamp.com. Get on it, get on it, get on it, and enjoy.
Welcome to the Theology Nerd Podcast with the Dr. Tripp Fuller. This is a shorter Q&A episode where your friendly local internet theologian answers questions submitted by you. There are lots of ways you can submit a question for Tripp to answer. You can go to homebrewedchristianity.com, click the send voicemail button on the right-hand side near the scroll bar. You can also leave a 5-star review on iTunes and just put your question as the review. You can also tweet at Tripp Fuller, that's 2 P's and 2 L's. Or you can send an email with your question to mediaguru@homebrewedchristianity.com. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast and to our email list. That way you never miss out on new episodes or live events near you. Just go to homebrewedchristianity.com to learn more.
Hello, Theology Nerds, and today, Brian McLaren and I are going to be tackling a number of the questions you sent in. The next question comes from Michelle and Mark. They said, we are about to become parents for the first time and would love some advice on sharing our faith with less baggage than we received to our children.
So Michelle and Mark, can I just say, I travel and speak all the time, and this is becoming one of the most common questions I get everywhere I go. Almost every single Q&A session I do, this is a question I hear. I was on a phone call with a group of people a couple weeks ago who I'd met in all these different places, and they said, we really want to give help to people on this question. And so just to encourage everybody, there's a group of people secretly plotting a progressive Christian focus on the family. Now, that might sound absurd, but in other words, how can we actually provide practical help that takes science seriously, human development, child psychology, all the rest, has deep theological and ethical roots, and is humane and relevant to this time. So there are people grappling with this, and the fact that Michelle and Mark would ask this question to me is just a great sign of something that's desperately needed. In my most recent book, The Great Spiritual Migration, the first third of the book, in a sense suggests that what congregations should be is schools or studios of love, and that one of our great challenges is figuring out what is a curriculum of love. And if we figure that out, how do we help children learn that? How do we help teenagers? How do we help young adults, middle-aged people, senior citizens? How do we help people at all the stages of life to stay enrolled in the school of love, so to speak? And so Michelle and Mark's question is absolutely fantastic. I think I have one primary suggestion, and then Tripp, I'd love to hear what you think, because you're in this game right now, and then, maybe that'll stir something else. But here's what I would say. I don't think that it's very easy to say to your kids, we belong to the Christian religion, and that gives us all the answers, or that gives us the moral framework, because the Christian religion now is so contested, and so there are so many Christianities out there. So I think this becomes an opportunity for a mom and a dad, or two parents of whatever configuration, to say to their kids, we are trying to learn how to be the most loving version of ourselves that we can be. And here's how we're doing it. And here's how we see this. And we want to share with you the very best that we know. In other words, I would almost take more of the responsibility back to yourselves as parents. and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Tripp, but I have a feeling that's what really is behind homebrewed Christianity, is this idea that when you can't trust Budweiser to make the best beer, you got to take a little more into your own hands. And so in a sense, you'd be saying this is homebrewed in the sense of a family home business of brewing our version of Christianity that the people we love the most, this is what we want to give to them. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think part of it is recognizing that the assumptions at the heart of kind of formation in the church in modernity are just problematic, that a lot of parents are either see Christianity as like the truth, so they put them in a situation where they eventually run through the steps that then can be verified that they're on the right team of Jesus, or in the more mainline context that they're raising a spiritual free agent, and it's problematic if their identity's formed in a distinctively Christian way until their enlightenment notion of the self rationally chooses the right religion. And I ran into that so much as a minister to students that what you're missing is that any religious tradition is not known from the outside. Like you cannot read, you can't read the sutras and be like, well, I guess that's not the religion for me. You can't just read the Bible and understand Christianity or whatever. And that religions are not primarily a collection of ideas. The ideas emerge out of the lived experience of that tradition. And the wisdom of a tradition really isn't received until you're formed by it and in it. And so, one thing I would say is that when Alicia and I found out we were pregnant with Elgin, our oldest, the 10-year-old, we decided we were no longer going to work at churches where you argued about who was welcome, whether or not you cared for the planet, and whether or not justice was an activity and not a debate topic. And that meant we were at churches where those positions were allowed but not acted on, so we sought different churches to be ministers at. Because your children are going to pick up, if you participate in a church, the consensus opinions of the church pick up. So that was important. The other one was we don't join churches where only straight white men talk all the time.
Yes.
And that has meant that it was part of choosing congregations, and that to me is important because I know it communicates things. And the same thing that if you go into a worship service and there's no silence, they don't attend to wonder, and I can't hear people singing next to me. I just don't, those aren't my thing. I want silence at some point because the service should never be fully structured in advance, because you're coming to attend to a mystery, not, explain it and stuff like that. So thinking about those decisions when you're picking a community, but know that being a part of a community is, I think, really essential. There's a reason there's no cultures and no religions that are made for individuals, because human beings learn to act. And if you're in a community, it's not about the conclusions as picking the best questions. So that would be like, what are the questions that drive this community, and how do you cultivate those questions in your family, and how do you put actions to the ideas that are there? For us as a family, that has, now I have a lot less religious baggage than Alicia does. She grew up in a fundamentalist home. And so we have very different experiences. So we have different jobs. Like, I am the one who will sit and have the conversations with Elgin, because the others are 4 and 1. I'll have long conversations with Elgin and stuff, and I'm the one that will sit and read the Bible with the children and then discuss it. Alicia will plan like art projects and then discuss what came up in them with the kids. Like, so part of it was going like, what kind of memories do you want your children leaving with of faith? And I rarely go a day without reading the Bible and praying. And so that's part of who Tripp is. Alicia, it wrestles with scripture. It's very frustrating for her sometimes. And, so I was like, I'll do that. And she loves experiencing the sacred through art and using it as a way to discuss it. And so like as imposing some form of spirituality on the home and be like, this is what a biblical home does, or this is what progressive Christians do. How do you give to your children the elements of the faith that are most animating to you? And how do you give space and support the other to pass on what excites and energizes them? Has been one of the ways we kind of framed it. In the last thing that pops up is we, based on how old they are, try to invite them into thinking about making actions that are inspired by their faith. So the way we do Christmas season and everything is, we've told them the story of the historical Saint Nick for a long time. And Christmas is Jesus's birthday party. So obviously we shouldn't get more gifts than the birthday boy. So unlike a lot of families, we only get 3. Your grandparents can each give you 1 and we will, but we don't get more than Jesus. And like the stockings are used to put stuff in for Saint Nick's helpers to take to other places. Like, we know we're going to have to play those games that everyone has and kids have expectations. So how do you use them to re-thematize those experiences as something different? Like an Elgin eventually figures out that when St. Nick called to talk about how you could volunteer during Christmas week or what you could collect stuff for was really me on the phone. Now he knows like, but the thing is every year at Christmas, the family has to figure out what are the needs in our community and how can we help? And so this year he's like, I want to be St. Nick and call Cora. I'm like, your voice is not deep enough. I have a high quality St. Nick voice. But so in making it fun where they're involved, and now he's thinking already, he's brought up like, because we've moved, he can see different needs in the community we're in now. And like, maybe that could be our family project this Christmas. And yes, so I know people who would be uncomfortable by having their family participate in such religious things until they really believe they want to be a part of it. And we just say like, oh, these are the practices our kids are going to do. And if they don't want to believe something or whatever, like we have no desire to make them believe anything. Yeah. But these are the stories that center our reflection about what it means to be a family together. And, there's some others too, but I totally get that idea. And the other thing I'd say, if you're about to have a kid, is you are not allowed to judge anything you do until you've both slept 8 hours for a week. And so write down beautiful moments and just wait until you've all slept because you can have all this emotion. You have this expectation, like, am I doing it right? Am I screwing this up and stuff? And with newborns are just like it's just a crazy experience. So you just give yourself tons of grace when you start. Oh, and here's one question I would ask. How would you frame drawing boundaries with the grandparents around faith? That was something I did not think of in advance. And I really feel like there's some way, if you're not wanting them to have the baggage, that you can invite parents in and affirm the gift they gave you in faith without saying you have permission when I'm not around to try to save my child or whatever. Yeah. That's a really, I don't think I have enough experience to offer a great answer on that, except to say that if I had just given my answer, which was sort of about taking more responsibility as parents and in some ways having freedom as parents to really go to your heart and not just try to replicate what was done to or for you, you brought in, Tripp, the value of being part of a community and the necessity, as you said, what you said, I thought a lot of parents would be or a lot of people when they find out they're pregnant would be really smart to go through some serious, maybe we ought to change churches discussions, because we want that community we don't want that community to damage our child, and we do want it to form our child in the best way possible. And then part of that then is also saying, and how does the extended family fit in on this? All of that reinforces for me, Tripp, this idea, to use my term, that people really are improvising and experimenting and constructing a new kind of Christianity. They really are in a homebrew situation. And we ought to expect that can create some problems with grandparents and uncles and aunts who have a whole different set of assumptions
And we shouldn't be surprised about that, shouldn't feel guilty about that, shouldn't, but we ought to be prepared for it. Hey, could I share as you were talking, I managed to pull up this little quote that I think it could be really helpful on this. This comes from a Catholic educator named Catherine Maresca, who some folks might be familiar with something called Godly Play, and the Catholic version of it is Catechesis of the Good Shepherd. And so this is from a book by Catherine Maresca called Children's Signs and Spiritual Literacy. And it's like 3 paragraphs, but I think it's just gold. She's referring to Maria Cavalletti, who is the founder of Montessori education, or one of the founders. Finally, Maria Cavalletti emphasizes the importance of being specific. You can't teach children language without teaching children a language. She writes, wishing to stay on a vague level without any specific content is the same as wanting a child to talk without using any particular language. Some parents say they don't want their children to learn a particular religion because they want them to be free to choose their own, but these children are missing the opportunity to become spiritually literate. To be initiated into the signs of the religious tradition creates the possibility of grasping the signs of many traditions and of respecting the integrity of each of those traditions. So we need to be religious in a particular way, true to the faith we affirm for ourselves, in order to foster the spiritual and religious literacy of our children. This is a service to our children. We have to be specific. While we don't reject other traditions, a particular religion has to be our starting point. To say, I'm spiritual but not religious is like saying, I'm linguistic but don't speak any particular language. Everyone has innate linguistic capacity that gets activated as one learns a particular language or languages. Likewise, everyone has spiritual capacity that gets activated and mobilized through becoming religious in a particular way. Becoming religious in a particular way is foundational for relating to the religious other. One more paragraph. Children who have learned their native language well are poised to learn new languages with greater ease. Children who learn the language of their religious tradition are likewise poised to grasp the sacred signs of another tradition. As we nurture the spiritual life of young children with sacred signs, we simultaneously build a foundation of respect and understanding for others' beliefs. With spiritual literacy, faith and interfaith formation work hand in hand, promoting in turn a more peaceful world. Isn't that great? I just love it.
I do think that's really important, and the hang up that some people have on taking that seriously is they feel like they're violating some of the freedom they want their child to have spiritually, when what they're really doing is not giving them an opportunity to develop those muscles. The other side of it is when they have questions, it sends them other directions to hear those questions and help them ask them well. And that has a lot to do with what you do in their teenagers. So, Michelle and Mark will figure that out in 16 years. So I do think don't feel overwhelmed if you're a new parent. Like parenting is kind of like baseball. Winning means you get in the batter's box. And when you win 30% of the time, you're an all-star, but you got to get in the box.
That's great. I love it. That's great. Well, just hearing this just makes me think how much help lots and lots of young parents are going to need just to, in a sense, get free from a huge oppressive load that they, that was imposed on them as children, but then not to overreact to that. And one of the downsides of fundamentalism in whatever, form is that it defines religion. It claims to be the only valid way of being religious. And so parents who were brought up more or less fundamentalist have to give themselves permission to break out of that and say, there is another way to be religious or another way to be spiritual. And that's open for them.